In the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon, life was simple for Marcus. He had just moved to the city after years of living in a small town, and now he worked at a gas station just outside the city limits. The station was quiet, with only a few regular customers who came for gas and snacks. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, and Marcus liked it that way. It was peaceful, and the job was easy enough. But as days passed, he began to notice something strange. Every morning, without fail, a golden retriever would appear by the side of the road near the gas station. At first, Marcus thought the dog was just passing by or looking for food, but over time, the dog became a permanent fixture. It sat by the road, looking down the street, staring into the distance with a melancholy expression. The dog never moved, never barked, and never approached any of the customers. It was as if it was waiting for something or someone who would never arrive. Marcus found himself growing increasingly curious about the dog. It seemed like he had been there for a long time, and despite the cars passing by and people coming and going, the dog remained still, like it was in a trance. His coat was a little ragged, and his eyes held a kind of sadness that Marcus couldn't quite explain. One afternoon, as Marcus was finishing his shift, he decided to approach the dog. He'd seen him day after day, and something inside him stirred. The dog needed help. That much was clear. Marcus crouched down slowly, trying not to startle the dog, and spoke softly. "Hey there, buddy. What's your story?" The dog didn't flinch. It just stared at Marcus with those deep, sorrowful eyes. Marcus gently reached out a hand, and to his surprise, the dog didn't pull away. He let Marcus pet him, his fur soft under Marcus's fingers. For the first time, the dog seemed to relax a little. "What are you doing out here all alone?" "Huh?" Marcus asked softly, but the dog didn't answer. Of course, Marcus scratched behind his ears and noticed the dog's collar. Slightly worn and dirty, it was clear that someone had once cared for him. But now, he was just a lonely figure by the side of the road. The next day, Marcus returned to the gas station with the intention of helping the dog. He brought a bowl of water and some food. Setting it down near the dog, he sat next to him, waiting for him to eat. To his surprise, the dog began to eat, slowly but steadily, as if he hadn't had a decent meal in a long time. Marcus didn't know why, but he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility for this dog. Maybe it was because he saw a reflection of his own loneliness in the dog's eyes. Marcus had moved to the city with no real plan, no friends, and no family nearby. His life felt just as empty as the dog's. But the dog had been waiting for something, someone. Marcus was unsure whether the dog was waiting for its original owners or simply for someone to take notice of him. Days passed, and Marcus continued to visit the dog, bringing him food and sitting with him. He decided to call him Max. It seemed like the right name for such a loyal, patient dog. The dog never strayed far from the roadside, and despite Marcus's attempts to take him home, Max always returned to his spot by the road, as if he was waiting for something he couldn't explain. It wasn't until one day, when Marcus asked around at the station, that he learned more about Max's past. Rick, the night shift worker, had been around for years and knew the story. "Max? Yeah, he's been here for a while," Rick said, scratching his beard thoughtfully. "A few years ago, some folks brought him here. They used to come around all the time for gas. And then one day, they just disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. Max just kept coming back here. He's been waiting for them ever since." Marcus listened, his heart sinking. The idea that Max had been abandoned by his family, left to wait by the road for someone who would never return, struck a chord deep inside him. How could anyone do that to such a loyal dog? For the next few weeks, Marcus's bond with Max grew stronger. Every day, he spent more time with him, and the dog began to trust him more and more. Max would greet him at the door of the gas station, his tail wagging, and he seemed genuinely happy to see Marcus. The dog was no longer just a stray. He was a friend, someone Marcus could count on. One evening, Marcus came to work to find that Max wasn't at his usual spot by the road. His heart skipped a beat. Had something happened to him? Had he wandered off? Or worse, had something happened to him? Marcus hurried outside, scanning the area, his eyes darting around. Then, he spotted Max, but it wasn't like usual. Max was lying in the middle of the road, looking up at the sky, his tail wagging lazily. As soon as Max saw Marcus, he stood up and trotted over to him, his eyes filled with the same sadness, but also a spark of recognition. "Hey, buddy, you scared me there," Marcus said, his voice soft as he bent down to pet the dog. Max nuzzled his hand, and Marcus smiled. He had never felt such a deep connection to an animal before. It was as if they understood each other completely. Little did Marcus know, that night would change everything. Something in the air felt different. Max seemed more restless than usual, pacing around in circles as if he was sensing something that Marcus couldn't. It wasn't until the next morning that Marcus would learn the truth about why Max had been waiting all this time. The next day, Marcus woke up to the usual quiet morning at the gas station. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the parking lot. Max, as always, was waiting for him, sitting patiently by the side of the road, just like he had done for the past few weeks. But today was different. As Marcus walked toward the dog, he noticed that Max's behavior was more agitated than usual. The dog was pacing back and forth, looking down the road as if waiting for something. The usual calmness in Max's demeanor seemed replaced by an anxious energy. Marcus called out to him. "Hey, buddy," he said, squatting down to Max's level. "What's going on?" "Huh?" Max didn't respond with his usual tail wagging or soft nuzzle. Instead, the dog stood still, staring intently down the road. Marcus followed his gaze but saw nothing, just the empty stretch of asphalt that led to the nearby village. Max's body language was different today, tense, almost as if he had sensed something that Marcus couldn't. A strange chill ran down Marcus's spine, but he dismissed it, brushing it off as his imagination. After all, he had grown used to Max's peculiar behavior. But today, something felt different. Something felt like it was on the verge of happening. At lunchtime, Marcus noticed that Max was no longer by the road. Panic immediately struck him. He quickly rushed out of the gas station and scanned the area. Where could Max have gone? He had never strayed far before. Just as he was about to turn around in search of the dog, he heard a faint sound from behind the gas station. It was a soft whine, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable once Marcus focused on it. He rushed around the corner, heart pounding, only to find Max standing near the back fence, looking at something in the distance. Following Max's gaze, Marcus squinted and saw a figure in the distance, a person, walking toward them down the road. "Who's that?" Marcus muttered to himself. His curiosity piqued. Max's tail wagged slightly, but the dog remained still, almost as if waiting for something. The person was getting closer now, and as they approached, Marcus could make out a figure dressed in a weathered coat, moving slowly but steadily. The closer they got, the more familiar they seemed. Marcus's heart skipped a beat when he recognized the face. "Charlie," Marcus whispered, astonished. It was a man, but it wasn't just anyone. It was Charlie, the man who used to live in the house on the hill, the same house where Marcus had seen Max's previous owners. The man's face was weathered, and his clothes looked old and tattered, but it was unmistakably Charlie, the man who had been a staple in the neighborhood for years. The one whose family had disappeared mysteriously several months ago. Max immediately trotted toward the man, barking happily as he ran. Marcus watched in confusion as Charlie knelt down to greet the dog. He didn't seem at all surprised to see Max. In fact, he smiled warmly, patting the dog's head affectionately. "Hey, old boy," Charlie said with a chuckle, his voice sounding familiar to Marcus. "Still waiting for me? Huh. You've been a good dog." Marcus stood frozen in disbelief. The man he thought had been gone for so long was standing right in front of him, and there was no sign of the tragic accident that had been the talk of the town. How could Charlie be here, in the flesh, when everyone thought he and his family had perished in that terrible crash months ago? "Charlie," Marcus called out, his voice tentative. Charlie looked up at Marcus, his expression slightly confused at first. "Yes," he replied, standing up and brushing off his pants. "Charlie, it's me, Marcus," Marcus said, still processing the situation. I thought you and your family." Charlie's face softened, and he gave a small laugh, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Ah, I see. There's been a lot of confusion around that. Hasn't there? He said with a faint smile. Let me explain. Marcus listened intently as Charlie began to recount the story that had been hidden for so long. The accident that everyone believed had taken Charlie and his family was not an accident at all. The truth was far more complicated. Charlie had indeed been in a crash, but he had survived. His wife and child, however, had not. Charlie had been left with the heart-wrenching grief of losing his family and the pain of watching Max, the dog who had been a constant companion to them all, wait by the road every day, as if still waiting for his family to return. I couldn't stay in that house, Charlie explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. Everything there reminded me of them, so I left. I wandered for a while, trying to escape the memories. I stayed away from everyone because I couldn't bear to face them, and I didn't know how to tell anyone the truth. The realization hit Marcus like a ton of bricks. Max had been waiting for Charlie, not for his previous owners, but for the man who had left the town and his family behind. It had all become clear now. The dog had been waiting for Charlie's return, not understanding that he wasn't going to come back in the same way. Charlie reached out and patted Max on the head again, his eyes misty. This old dog, he muttered, has been waiting for me, even though I didn't deserve his loyalty. I don't know what to do now. Marcus, I couldn't take him back to the house. It's all too painful. Marcus stood quietly, processing everything Charlie had shared with him. He had thought Max was waiting for something that would never come, but the truth was even more heartbreaking. Max had been waiting for the person who had left, the person who had carried the weight of the past on his shoulders, unable to move forward. I don't know what to say, Marcus finally said, but I think Max has been waiting for you to find peace. He's a loyal dog. Charlie, he's been holding on for you. Charlie nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on Max. I know. I owe him everything. The two of them stood there for a long while, Max sitting peacefully between them, as the sun began to set. In that quiet moment, there was an understanding that passed between Marcus and Charlie. Max had been waiting, not for closure, but for the opportunity to move on with Charlie by his side. Charlie wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope. He had a second chance, not only to find peace within himself, but to offer Max the home he deserved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Charlie reached down and gently lifted Max by the collar, leading him toward Marcus. Come on, old boy, let's go home, he whispered. Marcus smiled, watching the three of them walk away. It wasn't just Max who had found a way to move on. It was Charlie too. And in that moment, he knew that life, much like the road they walked, would always lead them to unexpected places. But sometimes, the journey was worth it. The next few weeks passed in a haze of quiet relief for Charlie. Every day, he took Max on long walks around the village, feeling a weight slowly lift off his shoulders. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. The bond between him and Max was as strong as ever. But now, it had a new sense of purpose. Max had waited, not for the past, but for the future, a future with Charlie. One crisp morning, as the leaves changed colors with the onset of autumn, Charlie decided to return to the house. He had avoided it for so long, unable to bear the memories. But now, he realized he could not keep running from them. He had to confront the pain, face the ghosts of the past, and move forward. He needed to rebuild, not just his home, but his life. Marcus offered to come with him, but Charlie insisted that he go alone. This is something I need to do on my own, he explained. But I appreciate you being here for me. Marcus, you've helped me more than you'll ever know. As Charlie stood before the house, he felt a surge of emotion, both fear and gratitude. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love now felt like an empty shell. Max stood at his side, his presence a reminder that not everything was lost. Charlie opened the door slowly, the creak of the hinges familiar yet haunting. It had been too long since he'd been inside. The dust had settled, the memories lingering in every corner. But this time, instead of feeling overwhelmed by the sadness, Charlie felt a strange peace. He had come back to face his fears, to embrace the past, and to let go. Max trotted inside, sniffing around, clearly at ease in the familiar surroundings. He knew this place, and for the first time, Charlie allowed himself to believe that they both could be happy here again. Maybe the house wasn't just a place of sorrow. It could also be a place of new beginnings. Charlie sat down at the kitchen table, running his hand over the old wood. "This place has a lot of memories," he murmured to Max, "but maybe it's time for new ones." That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Charlie sat on the porch with Max beside him, looking out over the land. The future, uncertain as it was, no longer seemed so daunting. He was not alone. He had Max, and perhaps, with time, he would find a way to share his life with others again. Charlie had learned that some wounds take longer to heal, but that didn't mean they were permanent. Sometimes, healing meant letting go of what you thought you had lost and embracing what could still be. As the stars appeared above, Charlie knew that, in time, he would learn to move forward with Max by his side. The past would always be a part of him, but it didn't have to define him. Together, they would walk into the future, with hope in their hearts and peace in their souls. Max, the loyal golden retriever, had taught Charlie that love and loyalty could survive even the darkest of times. And now, it was time for Charlie to return that love, to start fresh, and to build a life that honored both the past and the future. The road ahead was still long, but it no longer felt so uncertain. With Max by his side, Charlie knew they would face whatever came next, together. The end.